and welcome back to another episode of FrankieSense and More. My name is Ishita, and I will be your guest host for today. I am a second-year student of Media and Communication, and I reside in Pune, India. And as somebody who's studying film and media, I am truly honored and delighted to be here with our in-house movie critic, Brent Marchant. Brent is both a lifelong movie fan and he's also a longtime student of metaphysics. So as someone who is passionate about both these areas, his regular movie reviews are beautifully written dives into the intricacies of a story. Brent is also a writer and the author of 3 books. And for more information, please do check out his blog at brentmarchant.com. So very excited to be here with you today, Brent. And without further ado, I think we should get into it.
Well, thank you, Isha. It's nice to join you, and I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be a lot of fun. And thank you for making me look so good. I really appreciate that.
Oh, anytime.
Okay, so we have 5 new movies to look at this week. And the first of those is a film that has come out of Iran called A Hero. This is the latest film from a fairly well-known Iranian director named Asghar Farhadi, whose 2 of his previous films have won Oscars, The Salesman and Separation. And this film, personally, I think is his best. It's a story of a man who is imprisoned for not paying back a debt. It's kind of a medium security lockdown that he's in. So he's periodically let out for leaves to go visit his family. And he's really desperate to try and figure out a way to try and get out of prison and stay out permanently. One of the ways he could do that would be to pay back the creditor who brought the lawsuit against him that put him in jail. But unfortunately, the creditor is somebody who's very uncooperative. He's kind of an all or nothing sort of guy when it comes to repayment. And when he gets out on this particular leave, he has an opportunity to try and, fix things up with the guy, but he's not really cooperative about it. Basically, what happens is that the prisoner, his name is Rahim, his girlfriend finds a bag of lost gold coins, and they would cover a significant portion of the debt. So Rahim and his brother-in-law approach the creditor and say, can we make a good faith down payment on repaying this so that you can approach the court and say, hey, he's trying, let him out. Like I said, unfortunately, he's an all or nothing guy and won't let it happen. So when he's coming toward the end of his leave, he's still stuck with the question of what to do with these gold coins that he found. And the temptation is great for him to want to keep them, but he knows that it's probably not right for him to benefit from somebody else's misfortune. So he starts taking steps to try and figure out a way to return them to the lost owner. And by the time things play out, it's pretty obvious he's not going to get this task done by the time that he is ready to go back to jail. So he entrusts his sister and brother-in-law to carry on the task for them. And not long after he's back in prison, his sister and brother-in-law get a phone call from a woman who says, oh, they're mine, and can I come claim them? Mm-hmm. So she comes to see them, and she gives a very accurate description of, the bag that the coins were in and where they were lost and how they came lost. And the brother and sister-in-law are convinced that, well, okay, she must be telling the truth. They give her the coins, and she leaves. And when word gets back to the prison of what's unfolded, the prison officials are very, very enthusiastic, saying, look at this prisoner. He did this good deed to go out of his way to try and reunite these lost coins with their proper owner. Oh. And they want to make a big deal out of the fact that, well, it's probably because of the expert rehabilitation that he's gotten in prison that's made him such a good Samaritan. So they arrange media interviews for him, and he ends up becoming kind of a local celebrity. They hook him up with a local charity that helps him out financially and helps him land a job so he can continue paying off the rest of his debt. But according to the old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. when he goes to interview for the job that he's been placed with the charity, they start scrutinizing him very carefully about the story of what happened. And since the media interviews that he did weren't exactly directly on point as far as what happened, suddenly his story seems to start falling apart.
Right.
And overnight, he goes from being a hero to being a pariah. And then he has to try and backtrack to see how he can fix the situation, but it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. He still has the aspiration of wanting to live up to being a good person and being a hero, but that's going to be harder and harder for him to do. That doesn't mean it's impossible. And that's where the story goes as it plays out to the end. So I won't say any more because I'd be a spoiler if I did that. But it's interesting to see how this is a story of somebody who is, it's a morality play or a cautionary tale about how you behave, what kind of karma you might end up building out of things, and exactly what's going to unfold as a result of it. I like this movie a lot in the fact that unlike some of Farhadi's other films, this one moves along at a brisker pace. He sometimes has a tendency in his films to take like a very key moral issue and just sort of stretch it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes almost a little too obvious in the way he does it with his scripts. But he doesn't do that here. He's tightened things up. He's made it more of a streamlined sort of unfolding of the story. And I really like that. I think that is a big improvement in his work. So I really enjoyed this one a lot. It's a very well-made film. It's won multiple awards. It picked up a couple of awards at the Cannes Film Festival and was also nominated for the event's highest honor, the Palme d'Or.
Wow.
Yeah, that's quite a feather in his cap or something like that, you know.
Hey.
It's also, it was named the best foreign language film from the National Board of Review, which is another high honor.
Yeah. Also
picked up the awards for best original screenplay from that organization. And it's been nominated for Best Foreign Language Film in the Golden Globe competition and the Critics' Choice Awards. So that's quite a haul of honors, you know.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
I'm a little surprised it didn't get nominated for an Oscar because his work often is nominated in the Best Foreign Picture category. It wasn't this time, but nevertheless, I still really enjoyed this film a lot, and I think it's some of his best work. As I say, that he really does a great job in telling the story and making it not quite so obvious or dragged out as in his other works.
Right. That sounds very interesting, and I'm also really curious to see what the ending of the film would have been. It took me a while to find it, but I found it pretty much at the last minute, so I'm really looking forward to watching it now.
Okay.
Yeah, I really like that moral play there and the situation he's in, because it's so relatable for anybody to be in that sort of situation, and then he wants to be a hero, but he's still faced with that tough choice.
Exactly. And, he's in some ways, he kind of gets backed into a corner by the prison officials when they start building him up to be this, this big heroic figure. And his words kind of get twisted and turned, and, well, he ends up kind of going along with it. And that's where he starts to get himself into trouble.
Right. Yeah, makes sense, because the prison officials would probably be really happy that, like you said, his rehabilitation has really turned him around. So he's an example for others to see how well it worked.
Exactly. And, the other thing, too, is that when the story starts to unravel and the people who have built him up, they find themselves in a position of having to protect their own behinds as a result of what they had done previously. So naturally, it's we didn't say this or we didn't say that, and we got to think about our reputation. And
Mm-hmm.
well, that only makes things worse for him, because that's on them, not on him.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a very interesting story. So how much do you think you would rate it?
I would rate this one 3.5 to 4 stars.
Okay.
Yeah, it's it's a good picture. It's available for streaming. In the U.S., it's an exclusive for Amazon Prime Video. It was in theaters briefly, but now it's gone exclusively to that one platform. So people in viewers in North America would need to look to Amazon to find it. So
Okay, that's great, and I'm very excited to watch it as well.
I hope you like it.
Great, thank you for that, Brent. Let's move on to our next movie.
Okay, so our next movie is Mass, which is the debut film from an American film director named Frank Kranz. And this tells the story of two middle-aged couples who have shared a terrible, terrible tragedy, something that's left them emotionally paralyzed for a couple of years. And they've had a lot of trouble getting past their grief and being able to move on with their lives. And they discover through working with a mediator that really the only way they're going to get past that is if the two couples decide to meet and discuss the situation jointly. And it's something that they really are very hesitant about doing. But thanks to the efforts of the mediator, they arranged for a meeting for them to meet at the conference room of an Episcopal church. So the four of them sit down very tentatively to start talking about this. And at this point, all the viewers really know is that these couples have jointly experienced this terrible tragedy. You don't know anything about the nature of it. And that's one of the things that makes this film work, because everything is not spoon-fed or handed to you right up front. They have to unfold it, like going through, like as psychiatrists often talk about, cutting away the layers of the onion.
Right.
Where you go through one stage to the next, and so on. And that's what these four individuals do. And in the course of what takes place, you see a lot of raw emotion coming out regarding their feelings toward the situation, toward the couples, jointly toward each other. In some cases, even between the spouses themselves. So you see a really interesting unfolding of the way these different layers of the situation are talked out and brokered through this meeting. And the interesting thing about it is that it's kind of hard to imagine a film that's based primarily on dialogues and monologues being interesting to look at. But the way this movie is filmed, the camera keeps moving from person to person. And it's a lot of times it involves some rather quick cuts in the editing. And that keeps it lively. It keeps it in a state where you almost feel like you're in the room with these people watching this play out. And as you begin to discover exactly what happened and the direction things are going in terms of perhaps trying to bring about healing or a resolution, it's very emotionally gripping. And you would think that's not something that would likely come out of a film that's based on this kind of a narrative. But it's done so very, very well. The acting is just outstanding. The four leads, Jason Isaacs, Martha Plimpton, Ann Dowd, and Reed Birney, are all stupendous. I mean, they're just really great performances. And Ann Dowd in particular has received 2 nominations from the Critics' Choice Awards and from the BAFTA Awards. That's the British equivalent of the Oscars for Best Supporting Actress. The film has also won the Independent Spirit Awards Robert Altman Award, which is given in recognition of outstanding casting. And the casting here is just absolutely spot on. These 4 people work together so well in this. That same competition also has the film nominated for Best First Screenplay, which that's always a major feather in a cap for a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. By the way, I wanted to add for the actress Ann Dowd, many people may not know who that name is, but they probably recognize who she is if they're fans of the TV series The Handmaid's Tale. She plays the rather notorious Aunt Lydia in that series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's really quite interesting to see her range when you compare her performance here to her performance on that TV series.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that was
um,
an amazing performance, I think, and by all four of them, like you rightly said. And I
yeah,
think they really added to the emotion because I think the whole movie was just strung together by the emotion that was there, and it was so intense and gripping. I really loved it too.
yeah. It's and it's a shame that this movie has not gotten more recognition. Unfortunately, it's been released by a distributor that doesn't always do a lot to support its films as effectively as it probably could.
Oh,
When I first started reading the award season nomination lists, I had never even heard this film. And as it turned out, when I backtracked and did some looking online, I found that it did come out in theaters very, very briefly, but then went to streaming almost right away. But with very little publicity behind it, I don't think most people have had a chance to even hear of it, let alone see it at this point.
right.
Well, my case at this point now is go see it. I think it's really worth it.
Right.
It's not something you want to watch if you're in kind of a downer mood, because it is going to be an emotional roller coaster as you're watching it.
Yeah.
But it certainly is well worth it in the end.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. So how much would you rate this one?
I would give this one 4 stars.
Yeah, I think it
I think
definitely
it's
deserves
definitely
that.
worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So let's move on to our next film.
Okay, so our next film is another one that I had not heard of until the Oscar nominations came out. It's a film that's nominated in the Best International Film category. Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom, a film from Bhutan. And this is a charming little film that tells the story of a teacher who is not terribly happy working as a teacher. He really wants to become a singer and relocate to Australia. But basically, he's operating under a government contract. He's in the fourth year of a 5-year contract. And the education secretary says, well, we're not going to let you out of your contract. And also, given the fact that you haven't been really performing up to par lately, we're going to reassign you to become a teacher in the mountainous village of Lunana, which is up near the Chinese border. And it's at very high altitude and has basically almost no modern amenities at all, including electricity.
That sounds
So,
bad.
yeah, as somebody who's accustomed to living in an urban center, he lives in the capital of Bhutan. This is like, a jaunt to purgatory for him.
Right.
So he goes along with it very hesitantly. But it's interesting. He goes through a transformation when he gets there because his presence is really valued. The locals really value the teachings, well, the value of a teacher. And as a result, he starts being made sort of like a local, I don't want to say a local celebrity, but a local distinguished person.
Wow.
That's something he wasn't used to before he got there. The other thing that is interesting when he gets there is he finds that there's a local musician who teaches him in the ways of mountain folk music, and it really starts to influence his own performance as well. So what starts out as something he really doesn't want to do changes very gradually into exactly what he needed if he wanted to change himself. Because if he wanted to move on with his life from where it was in an unsatisfying position, it really takes more than just changing location. It means changing the individual as well.
Right.
And this journey gives him the opportunity to do that. And it's warm, it's funny. He has experiences dealing with, how to keep his living quarters warm by operating a stove that runs on dried yak dung.
You would have never thought he'd have to do that.
Exactly. So it's really quite a charming, heartwarming film. It's a little bit predictable at times, but I can forgive that given the fact that it just really has its heart in the right place.
Yeah.
And gives viewers a nice examination of the idea of how a person can evolve personally to become who they're meant to be and bring them that fulfillment and satisfaction that they might not have been finding otherwise.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message.
And it's beautifully filmed too. I mean, this was filmed on location in the Bhutanese mountains, and it's just gorgeous to look at.
Wow, that does sound wonderful. I think I really like it, and that also seems very relatable in the way that he's looking for something else, but he ends up going with another thing that's actually for his own good, and it probably is even much better than anything he would have imagined.
Well, and also I think it's important to recognize too that, you know, we're all in a constant state of evolving, whether we recognize it or not. And the thing is, if we start to thwart that process, then we stagnate. You know, we get stuck and we become miserable and unfulfilled. And a lot of times we don't really always recognize exactly the reason why that's happening until we're put into a new set of circumstances like he is, where he's given the opportunity to see, this is what I need to do if I'm going to change and if my life is going to change. The thing that I found interesting about this film, it's a debut feature from, and I hope I don't destroy this person's name, Hoa Choining Georgie, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting to see someone who does a debut feature going right to getting an Oscar nomination on their first try. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment.
That is something, definitely.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that there were some other films, other international films that were in the running that this one managed to beat out, which it was kind of a surprise because some of those other ones, like A Hero, which we talked about earlier, got left off the list of nominees, and this one made it on. So that's really saying something right there.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, it must be a really good film.
Yeah, it's really, it's also a film I think that would be, you know, good for families because it gives them an opportunity to pass on important lessons to children who watch it with their parents.
Right.
So,
yeah, that sounds amazing. So how much would you rate this one?
I would give this one 4 stars. And it's available for multiple streaming platforms right now too. So this one is definitely available.
Great. I look forward to watching it too. So moving on to our next film.
Okay, our next film is a little independent film called Delicate State. And this was another one that I found to be an amazing little surprise. I saw this last fall at the St. Louis Film Festival, and it had been primarily playing the film festival circuit. It's now available for streaming, which is I'm glad to see because it's really a wonderful film. This tells the story of a couple that discovers they're going to have a child, and they're very thrilled and ecstatic about the idea of this blessed event. And to as a gift to the child, they decide that they're going to record a pregnancy video log that the child can watch later, so they could see like what their parents were going through as they were going through this process. Now, the thing about this film is it starts out a little slow. You know, in the early video log segments, you see the parents being, you know, beaming with happiness and joy, which is nice, but you kind of wonder, like, okay, where are we going with this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then the film, not long into it, takes a very radical left turn. And suddenly the couple finds themselves living in what's an unnamed American city where they're facing the prospect of a civil war, and a really nasty one at that. They're doing everything they can to try and stay out of it, focus on the pregnancy exclusively, but they find that they really can't avoid what's going on around them. The circumstances just start to become so dire that they have to do everything they can just to be able to keep themselves alive and hopefully be able to carry this pregnancy to term under conditions that grow progressively worse as it plays out. Um, and it really, at that point, takes on a very kind of edge of your seat sort of quality, which I was surprised at just how drastic a turn in tone it took when it got to that point. There's some really interesting things about this too. This was a debut feature from writer, director, actress Paula Rhodes, who plays the lead opposite her husband. And essentially, they became like a two-person cast and crew for making this film. And it was also filmed during the director's own pregnancy. So that adds an added dimension of immediacy to the story. Because when you're watching this, you're saying to yourself, this really could possibly not too far from the truth, especially, with some of the events that happened politically. The events of January 6th, 2021 come to mind in the U.S., when that takes place. So it's also really interesting from the standpoint that in an interview I read with the director, she talked about the idea that one of the points that she wanted to make in making this film was trying to give viewers a sense of the experience of what a pregnant woman would experience during wartime. I mean, there are so many locations around the world where that has happened, in the Middle East and Central America, and obviously, unfortunately, as we see now in Ukraine as well. So there's kind of an uncanny sort of timing relevancy that comes to this film under current conditions.
Definitely.
It really just absolutely blew me away, and I said to myself, this film really deserves wider exposure than it has gotten. Because not a lot of people necessarily go to film festivals, and if they don't hear about it when it goes to streaming, they still may not hear about it. But I'm very pleased to see that this film has found a home online now, and that hopefully viewers will be able to watch it and really see what families, particularly women in these circumstances, are up against under conditions like that.
Wow, I think you summed it up so well. And that's so true, that I didn't know actually that she was like there bringing that unique perspective to the table. That is really something. And yeah, the film started off very slow, like you said, and it was so relaxed, and it was almost cute in a way that they're talking to their baby and everything. And you can't anticipate what's going to happen in like the next few minutes. So
well, yeah, I mean, with the slow beginning, I was beginning to think, where exactly are they going with this? I mean, I wasn't really interested in watching an hour and a half worth of, an extended baby shower. But that it clearly does not go in that direction once the situation begins to appear with the Civil War breaking out. Then it just becomes gripping and chilling, and you're on your edge of your seat saying, how is this going to unfold? So
yeah, it was a true thriller, like in the second half, I think.
Well, and also I'm really pleased to see that it really shows an independent film with a small budget, a small cast, and a small crew can do tremendous film work. I mean, so often these little productions just don't get the recognition they really and truly deserve. And I'm happy to say that this was one case where that really was true. So for fans who enjoy subject matter like this, or for fans who are interested in films in this kind of a genre, I'd recommend definitely rent this.
Great. So how much would you give this one?
I would give this one 4.5.
Oh.
Yeah, 4.5 stars. And actually, if the beginning had been a little tighter, it probably would have gone up to 5. But as I say, I had to kind of weigh that against the overall quality of the production, and I felt that the beginning was a little too slow for its own good at times. But beyond that, I just loved everything else about this film.
Yeah, I think they wanted to just, maybe they dragged it on a little bit too much, but I think they wanted to portray like how their life was just so normal and how these people were going on about their everyday routine when this hit, so that you're really, shocked by the gravity of the situation when it changes.
Absolutely, and also the fact that there are some very interesting special effects that they were able to pull off in this film, again on a small budget, which I just found mind blowing.
Definitely from the planes and everything, and
Yeah.
yeah. The sets and everything towards the end when they're just traveling on the road and dragging on, just trying to find a way through when the war is going on. I think that was really well depicted.
And I also think it's important to recognize too that it's a cautionary tale for people in terms of staying aware of what's going on in your surroundings, especially when it comes to social and political movements, because I think they really were constantly trying to look the other way, like, okay, we're just going to be like ostriches here and bury our head in the sand, but you really can't do that. And by doing that, they ended up potentially putting themselves into much greater peril than they ever could have possibly imagined.
Yeah.
Especially when there were warnings along the way saying, hey, come on, you need to start taking action on this to protect yourself and your child. Especially, when you think of the fact that children represent the future, and you hope that they're going to be the ones to bring out new promise and new hope for things. And if they don't even have the chance of being born, how can they do that? So it's important not just to make sure that you care for them physically while they're being carried to term, excuse me, but also to be able to make sure that they have an environment that they're going to come into to grow up so that they can achieve what they want to achieve. And if we're the stewards looking out for that beforehand and don't do our job to protect it, it makes it that much more difficult.
Right. Yeah. They did, I think, put it off for as long as possible. And I think they were almost ignorant because maybe they didn't want to believe that something like this could happen. So they were just living in their little bubble, going along with it until it was too late and, the house comes crashing down and you just got to run out. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I think that happens in a lot of cases, particularly in more westernized countries where you think, oh, that couldn't possibly happen here.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, as Americans found out on January 6th of 2021, that's not necessarily the case.
Okay, thank you, Brent. And let's move on to our final movie for today.
Our final movie for today is a film called Skull, which translates to the word cheers. This is a documentary that was filmed in the Faroe Islands in the North Atlantic. It's a location that's not typically featured in films very often. But basically, this follows the story of two young people, an aspiring young poet named Dania Towson, and her boyfriend, who is a hip-hop artist named Trygve Danielson. And basically, it's in some ways, it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet type story. But it's also kind of a coming of age picture in some ways too, in the fact that Dania grew up in a very conservative Christian community in the islands, and from what I understand, conservative Christianity is very pervasive in the culture of the Faroe Islands. Her boyfriend Trygve is a hip hop artist and one whose lyrics are often very in your face. Using language that we can't really say out here. But it's interesting to see how these two people from opposite worlds start to become involved with one another. And it's something that causes Dania to start to evolve and transform herself. Basically because she's exposed to things that she hadn't been exposed before in the community she grew up in. And she's kind of torn between the idea of being herself, being true to her roots, and figuring out a way to integrate the two so that she finds a happy medium with them. Something that apparently is an issue for many of the younger people who live in the Faroe Islands. It's not that they want to abandon their roots, but they want things to be a little more open and a little more providing more opportunities for expression that might not necessarily jibe with what their upbringing allowed. And her involvement with Tryggvi certainly makes that possible. She finds that she's able to start dressing differently and speaking differently and writing differently. And at the same time, she also has kind of an influence on him, bringing in ideas that maybe he hadn't considered because he didn't grow up with the same kind of background that she did. I found it interesting that this was subject matter for a documentary. It's in some ways almost seemed like it could be a narrative feature, but the directors, Cecilie de Bell and Maria Torgaro, this is their first collaboration together. It's Cecilie de Bell's fourth feature film. How they were able to take sort of a everyday slice of life kind of story and make a documentary out of it that didn't seem like a documentary. So it's very interesting. And it's also, I think very enlightening to viewers who aren't familiar with like the locale where they live. It's beautifully filmed. You see things of the scenes of the Faroe Islands that are just gorgeous. You end up seeing a very interesting story evolve between Tanya and her boyfriend, and also between Tanya and her family, the people she grew up with, how they're trying to change the culture of the islands. She ended up becoming a reasonably successful best-selling author in the islands at a very young age. It was all because she allowed herself to evolve in ways that maybe were difficult in light of the circumstances she was living under. This film was it was the winner of the Gold Hugo Award at the Chicago Film Festival last year for Best Documentary. And unfortunately, this one is going to take some work to find. It's primarily been playing on the film festival circuit. There have been some special screenings in Europe, but so far I haven't seen any evidence of a mainstream distribution either in North America or anywhere else. I would really love to see it get it because it's a very interesting, engaging story. It's not a terribly long film. I believe it's only about 70 minutes. But it's something that is well worth your time when you're watching it.
Okay. Well, yeah, sounds very interesting. So it is officially like set to be a documentary.
Yeah. I mean, if I had any complaint about the film, it would be that it seems that it captured so many perfect moments incidentally that almost kind of made me wonder, well, how scripted was this? Or was it scripted? I mean, it almost seems kind of hard to believe at times that the camera just happened to be in the right place at the right time to come up with all of these really great scenes, between the two, but then again, I could be wrong. I mean, and maybe I'm being overly cynical about this. That's always a possibility. What plays out on the screen is definitely interesting to watch. And if the directors were fortunate enough to be present at the time when these really interesting developments just happened to take place, well, then, good for them. They had good luck then. So.
Wow, yeah, I think I definitely have to watch it to find out. Yeah. So was there like some conflict between her family and her as she was exploring this new identity of herself?
They were a little bit skeptical about, what road is she going down? Because she's hanging out with this guy who is certainly kind of questionable in their view. They find out that when she moves out of the family home and into her own place in the major city of the Faroe Islands, that she starts doing things like going out to clubs, things like that. So, but that's not really all that surprising in some ways, because when she was living within the community, she was often like a featured singer at the community's gatherings. So, okay, so she's going out to a different musical venue now, but it's not all that removed from where she grew up with. It's just different sources of different types of material, she's hearing there now. So.
So it's more about her self-discovery, that journey of how she finds her other self.
Yeah, I would say definitely I would call it a coming-of-age story.
Oh.
I mean, it's interesting compared to her boyfriend because, he already knows who he is. And he's definitely very different from her. He's very different from the community from which she came from. He's very unabashed at, expressing himself and even expressing interest in subjects that the Christian community would probably find somewhat appalling. I mean, he's got kind of an open mind about spirituality and religion and so forth, but that even includes, in some cases, an interest in things like, say, Satanism. And
that could possibly tell well.
That doesn't go over very well with mom and dad. So.
Oh, okay. So she got like two extremes, basically pulling her.
But the thing that's interesting is the fact that his dad is backs him up. He's like, this is who you are. Go out and be yourself. And I mean, if it doesn't set well with others, well, too bad. I mean, this is who you are. And that really emboldens him and gives him an extra degree of confidence that maybe Dania was lacking, and it rubbed off on her so that she could give herself permission to start doing some of the explorations into things that she never would have thought of doing when she was surrounded exclusively by her family.
Well, that sounds lovely. Yeah, I would really like to watch this one. How much would you give it?
I would give this one 4.5. Yeah, it's definitely good, and I really do hope that it gets a wider distribution because it really deserves it. It's interesting in 2021, which was not a particularly great year for films, in my view.
Yeah.
Documentaries saved the day. There were a lot of tremendous documentaries that came out last year. And I really am, was glad to see that they ended up getting, in a lot of cases, an unexpected amount of publicity and acceptance for a genre that a lot of times is often treated like a stepchild.
Yeah.
And, it was really good to see that. And speaking of documentaries, one of the things I wanted to mention also in passing is that I recently posted a new blog to my website about my top and bottom documentaries of 2021. When I did last month's show, I talked about the posting of the blog for the top and bottom narrative films for the year. But I hadn't published the documentary blog at that point. That's now online on my website. So you can see everything about all the wonderful documentaries I saw last year and really loved.
Okay, that's great. We'll be sure to check it out. Will Skal be there on it as well?
Yes.
Or is it there?
Yes, Skal made the cut.
Oh, that's great.
It definitely deserved to. I mean, it was really very well done. Like I say, probably the best bet for viewers to try and find it right now is to take a look on film festival schedules, because that seems to be the place where it's showing up most readily at this point. Hopefully, somebody will pick it up for distribution as a result of that. And that's one of the things that's good about film festivals is they they give filmmakers an opportunity to showcase their work and hopefully find somebody who will back them, for a general release. And like I say, this one deserves it. So
that's really nice.
And I love the title, the fact that it translates to Cheers.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's nice. I think that goes really well with her, just transitioning into somebody else, like Cheers to My New Self.
Yeah, and that's actually a central theme in the book of poetry that she wrote and released as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So those are our films for this time. We'll be back again later in the month with a second edition. And that one will include some new movie reviews, and it also will feature my predictions for the Oscars.
Oh, that's exciting.
Which I hope I get right this year.
I'm sure you'll get at least a few of them right.
Well, I typically do give predictions in the top 6 categories for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, Supporting Actor, Supporting Actress. And the past couple of years, there have been some very unexpected surprises that have come along. And this year, given the fact that most of the preliminary award ceremonies that have taken place, or that usually take place, have not taken place yet. So it's kind of hard to give any kind of track record to see who's a front runner, who isn't,
right.
So on. So,
well, then it's going to be all the more exciting because we won't really have any idea what the results would be.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, well, definitely looking forward to that.
So we'll be posting that on March 24th. So check back with us.
Great. Make sure to mark your calendars for that.
Well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed our first time together, and looking forward to more. Likewise,
Ben. Thank you so much for being here today, and I really loved speaking to you as well. So I guess that's a wrap.
That is. Cut, print it.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Bye-bye.